My sisters and brothers, the Lord be with you.
And also with you.
This is a proclamation of the Holy Gospel according to St. Luke.
Glory to you, Lord.
The apostle said to the Lord, "Increase your faith." The Lord replied, "If you have faith, the size of a mustard seed, you will say to this mulberry tree, 'Be uprooted and planted in the sea,' and it would obey you. Who among you would say to your servant, who has just come in from plowing or tending sheep in the field, 'Come here immediately and take your place at table'? Would he not rather say to him, 'Prepare something for me to eat. Put on your apron and wait on me a while I eat and drink. You may eat and drink when I am finished'? Is he grateful to that servant because he did what was commanded? So should it be with you. When you have done all you have been commanded, say, 'We are unprofitable servants. We have done what we are obliged to do.'" My sisters and brothers, this is the good news of our salvation.
Praise to you, Lord Jesus Christ.
Rather than a long drawn-out homily, the three of us are going to give a synopsis of our Franciscan journeys. What happened for us to be in these habits? Mine began long time ago. Picture this, the Bronx. Literally, I was working at Lincoln Hospital in the Bronx, and I was a young attending, believe it or not, and I was assigned to the consultation and liaison team at the hospital to serve as the consultant to the AIDS team. Nobody wanted that job. Prior to that, when I was a resident in Syracuse, just out of residency, the same thing happened. I went to work with the single AIDS patient in the psychiatric hospital because nobody else would want it. God had a way of telling me to work with the marginalized and the poor. When I worked at Lincoln Hospital, it was more or less the same thing. While I was there, I met a sister of Allegheny, a Franciscan sister of Allegheny. They're famous for having worn in their old habit a coffin on their heads. The coif was shaped like a coffin, and then the veil. Sister Pat Reed, terrific lady. They didn't wear the veil at that time. She went in civvies, and she was a chaplain there. And one day she said to me, "You know, Peter, there's something uniquely Franciscan about you." And I was taken aback. I had no clue what she meant. It's the way you deal with people, the way you treat your patients. And I said, "Well, I treat my patients that way anyway. It's not necessarily Franciscan." Rewind many decades before. I was 15, 16, living in the first house we owned in Miami. My bedroom faced the backyard. It was just off the kitchen, so it was in an L. And there was a little lemon tree in the backyard that was drying up. My father was going to cut it out. And one night, I remember having what I call a dream. I don't know what it was. I heard noises in the backyard, so my bed was next to the window, so I leaned up on my elbow, and I pulled the window back. And the little tree was glowing. And underneath the tree, from underneath the branches, comes a man looking like this. He had a smile on his face. And he came out from under, and he was holding the branches. The branches were heavy with lemons, but the tree hadn't given any lemons. And all I saw was, and he backed off and disappeared. I never knew what to make of that. dream. A couple of weeks later, when my father was getting ready to cut the tree down, it was sprouting green leaves, and it gave lemons. The incredible patron of ecology, of nature, saved that little lemon tree. And he saved me as well. I joined the OFMs. I had gone to talk to the TORs, but I didn't like, there's something about them I didn't like. And then I went to the OFMs. And I got stuck in Olean, New York in the winter, doing my postulancy with snow above my waist. But it was interesting. I learned the precepts of what poverty, chastity, and obedience were, even though the professed friars didn't always carry it out that way, but most of them did up there. And when I got to Washington, my experience was so different because I had idolized what I thought the Franciscans should be and what I saw in reality, and I left and came down to the Archdiocese of Miami. But that didn't work out. I felt weird. I felt like I was living in a fishbowl at the seminary. So I left a few weeks before my diaconate, and then I found Casina, and then St. Francis found me again, and I joined the Franciscans with Casina, and then I came and joined the order here. And we're back with Casina, oddly enough. I mentioned the story about Francis beckoning to me because I mentioned it to a friar who had served in Cuba for many years. He was with the, what province was that back then? The Basque province of Spain. And they had all the Caribbean. And Father Loredo, Miguel Loredo, may you rest in peace. I told him the story, and he said, he just pat my hand and he said, San Francisco llama al que quiere. St. Francis calls the ones he wants. And here I am.
What I like to say is, many years ago, muchos años pasado, 8th grade, growing up in Brooklyn and graduating. And one of the good sisters of St. Joseph, I was an altar boy. She came in and she said, "Oh, Joseph, you would make a lovely priest." And she held a chasuble next to me. And I said, "No, that's not what I want." I said I wanted to be a Franciscan brother. I had never met a Franciscan brother in my life, but this is what I wanted to do. And as time went on, my first teaching job was teaching with the brothers in Brooklyn. And after 5 years, I entered that community. Time changed. My mother got sick. I went home. Went back to teaching. Left on a Thursday, was back teaching on Monday as a layperson. First time I ever taught girls. Oy, what a mess that was. Anyway, I joined a community in California that was basically Benedictine in spirituality. And my name was Brother Francis. So even though I was with a Benedictine spirituality, I never left the Franciscans. In 1989, I came down to Florida. It'll be 30 years, obviously. And I had connected again with the brothers in Brooklyn. And when I came down here, I was wearing a black habit because they gave me a habit to wear. And as time went on, switched to ground. The Franciscans of Fort Lauderdale, we've been a corporation within the state of Florida since 1995. And then things happened, many doors opened. This morning we had a blessing of the animals here. It was a wonderful experience as always. All the pictures are online. It'll be in the newspaper tomorrow. Tomorrow at the Humane Society of Broward County, Brother John and I will be there to bless the animals. Being a Franciscan is who I am, okay? Francis, you know, a lot of times we picture Francis with next to a bird bath, okay, with the animals. It's pretty. But Francis was a real rebel. He didn't follow the usual path, and neither did I. So, Father Francis is truly Father Francis.
You have often heard me say that God draws straight with crooked lines. And if you were to ask Father Joseph, Father Peter, myself, Brother John, any of us, how did we get to where we are? Not one of us could give a definitive roadmap as to say, we started here, we hit here, we got gas there, and we wound up here. It was more like following the white rabbit down the rabbit hole, not knowing where it was going and not knowing what we were going to experience. Some of us in our journey encountered Tweedledee and Tweedledum. In my case, it was more like Tweedledum and Tweedledummer. Some of us encountered the Mad Queen, who kept on saying, off with their heads. And some of our superiors kind of fit that bill quite well. Some of us tried to follow the white rabbit and encountered the mad hare. And if you ever lived in community, I need not explain. But somewhere along the line, we emerged from the rabbit hole quite different from what we were when we entered. And we didn't know exactly where we were. I began my journey back in 1964, September 14th, Feast of the Exaltation of the Holy Cross, and I left Livingston, New Jersey to enter into the Alexian Brothers. Why the Alexian Brothers? I don't know. I had absolutely no interest or vocation, if you will, to the healthcare business, and I found myself in a religious order of healthcare workers. God's first left turn. I was with them for 6 years. I was very happy. I had completed my degree as a respiratory therapist, and I was on my way of being transferred, and I was hoping to be able to be transferred to our new hospital in San Jose, California. Well, that didn't happen because of the fact that the Holy Spirit, in her wisdom or in folly, tapped me on the shoulder and said, "You're not going to California, you're going to a seminary." So I wound up leaving the brothers and came back to New Jersey and completed my degree. And long and short of the story is I wound up in a Benedictine monastery. Lived there, studied there, taught there, professed my solemn vows, and everything seems set again. And when you're on one of those roller coasters, you know, that makes a direct left turn, a direct right turn, well, here we go again with another turn. And God put me in the Diocese of Patterson for 18 years. After 18 years of ministry in high school and in parish work, I wound up finding a situation where I had an opportunity to come to Florida. Now, if you would have asked me years before going to Florida, I would have said, you're mad. There's nothing in Florida for me. What do I know Florida? And I found myself applying for a position as a chaplain with Vitas Hospice. Having been exposed to the medical field for many years, I felt that this might be an opportunity for me to experience something different. And so, for the last 21 years, and I found myself falling in love with the work. I found myself falling in love with helping people who had lost loved ones, and for 10 years I was the director of bereavement services for them. But if you would have asked years prior to that, how do I get to where I am, I still can say, I don't know. But in that time, my sabbatical came to an end, and my bishop wanted me back to New Jersey, and I just felt that I just could not leave the work that I had fallen in love with. And so I lost my faculties. I was not allowed to say Mass publicly, and I think I stayed away from Mass for 2 weeks. And I said, I can't do this. And a friend of mine was a member of an independent Catholic church in Wilton Manors. And I said to my roommate at the time, I said, I think I'm going to go to Terry's church and see what that's all about. So I went to Holy Angels, and I felt at least I had some faith community that I could deal with and go to church and feel some sense of normalcy, although it would be the, as we say today, the new normal. And in that new normal milieu, I came across someone sitting next to me, and he was there, and hello, how are you? Nice to see you, nice to see you. And we got to know each other a little bit professionally. We'd see each other on Sundays. And one day he said to me, you know, Vin, you'd look good in brown. I thought, oh God, don't do this to me. First the Alexian brothers, and then the Benedictines, and now, no, please don't do this to me. And every once in a while he'd go, it looks good in brown. So I said, you know, it's like, whatever it is, like Jesus said to Judas, whatever it is you're going to do quickly. And I found myself in brown. Not only in brown, but several years after being in brown, I became the king of brown. I became the guardian of the house. Well, I tried to give it up several times, and it always came back to my door. And so for the last 17 years, I've been the guardian of the Franciscans of Fort Lauderdale. Now, what does that mean? It means I am the chief herder of cats. And if you've ever heard of cats, you know what that means. How do I get here? How do I, with all the spirituality, as the Lexi Brothers, we did not have a founder. It was a group of men who banded together during the Black Plague in Europe to bury the dead. Benedict was an individual who got disgusted with the secularization of Rome and went off by himself into the caves outside of Rome to live a hermit's life, only to find that people came to him for spiritual guidance, and so developed the monastic tradition in the Western world. Francis was an individual, as we know quite well from our preaching and our studies, that was an individual who was quite the bon vivant of his day. And if you were to say to him at that time, you're going to become a saint, he would say, yeah, right, okay. And all of a sudden, God then turns and there's another direct left turn. And somewhere along the line, it all begins to make sense. Although, if you look at a tapestry, if you look at the back of it, it's all pieces of reds and blues and greens and threads and knots and things hanging off. And you look at this and you say, but what in the world is this? Where do I make any sense? And then someone says, turn it around. Turn it around, and all of a sudden you say, oh, what a beautiful picture. And you know what's nice about that picture? You're in it. You're in it. It's not just us in religious life who find ourselves in the picture on the opposite side of the tapestry. Each one of you are part of that picture. Each one of you have your own story to tell. Whether it is that you got up one morning and went to school and fell in love and got married, whether you found yourself coming to a strange country, knowing very little English and yet making your place for yourself, whether you met a partner who you wanted to spend the rest of your life with, that sometimes was much shorter than you anticipated. We are all part of that picture. We're all part of that picture. And more importantly, you're part of our picture because you're here. At your baptism, when you were a kid and you were following the Roman traditions, if someone would have said to you, when you are of this age, you will belong to an independent Catholic church outside of the auspices of Rome, you would have said, never. Never. Why? I don't want to go to hell. And yet, here we sit today. Here we sit today.
Thank God.
And yes, thank God. What would it have been if we stayed? What would it have been had our partners lived and we lived to a ripe old age? What would it have been if we married someone else or never darkened the shores of America? What would have been? We don't know. But that's the mystery that we live and not the mystery that we solve. Right now, we are on that tapestry. Is it tied off? Is it cut from the weaver's shuttle? Maybe. Maybe this is all that we're going to have in that picture, that tapestry. But we don't know. There may be a lot of strings left over and a lot of chords to be added into that tapestry, which is our lives. And all we have to do is follow God, follow our conscience, and live good lives. Today we celebrate Francis, an individual whose life took left, rights, and centers and took more turns than we cared to believe because he thought he wanted to do. And God said, no. No, Francis, that's not what you want to do. This is what I want you to do. And if we look at our lives, this is what God is saying to us. It's not what you want. It's what I want. It may take you a while before you begin to say, gee, this is what I want too. Oh, good. Welcome to the real world. This is what I want for you. Is the tapestry done? No. Maybe. Who knows? But that's not our worry. The worry is right now that we are part of that tapestry. We are part of that beautiful picture that God has created. And as Joan Crawford said, hold on, boys. It's going to be a bumpy ride. Because, as they say, the best is yet to come.
Sure.
And baby, won't it be?